Welcome to another episode of Shadows of the Tarot. James had been a friend of Elise and Tammy for many years, so when he asked Elise to give his friend Natasha a reading, she readily agreed and scheduled an appointment. Elise had never met Natasha before, but James often spoke highly of her. Natasha was a determined and resilient woman in her early 40s. Born into a modest family, she had always been the pillar of strength for her loved ones, her life defined by hard work and sacrifice. She often juggled multiple jobs to make ends meet, her dedication to her family unwavering despite the challenges she faced. Natasha had an athletic build and ordinary height. The stress of her current circumstances had faded her once vibrant beauty. She had dark hair streaked with gray, worn in a bun, and her eyes, though tired, were sharp and full of determination. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon when Natasha arrived at Elise's home. The warm light streaming through the windows gave the living room a comforting glow, but the air carried a subtle tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Natasha walked in with a confidence that belied her curiosity, her eyes scanning the room filled with books, crystals, and flickering candles. Elise greeted her warmly and gestured toward a small table draped with a velvet cloth. "Please have a seat," she said, her voice calm and soothing. Natasha sat down, her hands resting lightly on her lap. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the faint rustle of the wind outside. They sat and chatted over herbal tea, Natasha's voice tinged with both weariness and resolve. "Have you ever had a reading before?" Elise asked, shuffling her deck of tarot cards. Natasha shook her head. "No, but I've always been curious." Her voice was steady, but there was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. Elise smiled, sensing both Natasha's curiosity and her apprehension. As Elise laid the past, present, and future cards out, Natasha leaned in, her sharp eyes focused intently on the spread. The cards revealed that Natasha should be concerned about someone. Elise explained their significance, and Natasha's expression softened into a mix of understanding and concern. "That makes sense," Natasha said, her voice tinged with emotion. "I've been worried about my son, Gary. I think he might be involved in drugs. He's starting to look so haggard, and he's lost a lot of weight." She paused, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "I feel so helpless. I don't know how to reach him." Elise listened intently as Natasha continued. "I like his girlfriend, but I think they're a bad influence on each other. It's like they're feeding into something destructive. I'm caught between my fear for his health and my growing mistrust of her." Natasha's voice wavered, betraying the deep conflict within her. "It's so difficult to approach him without making things worse. I don't want to push him away, but I don't know how to help him either." Her inner turmoil was evident, her struggle revolving around the delicate balance of offering tough love while maintaining compassion and understanding. Elise nodded sympathetically, her mind already turning to how best to guide Natasha through this fraught situation. Elise opened an antique tin box to draw another card for further clarity. She pulled out the Justice card, its scale symbolizing fairness and accountability. "This card reminds us to be fair, honest, and responsible in all aspects of life," Elise explained. "It suggests that someone in a relationship may not be trustworthy. Instead of running away from mistakes, it's important to own up to them and make amends. It's about weighing right from wrong." Natasha nodded thoughtfully. "That resonates," she said. Despite the heavy emotion stirred during the session, she smiled faintly. "I've enjoyed this reading. I'll definitely spread the word about your services." As the session came to an end, Natasha thanked Elise and left, her usual confidence returning, albeit tempered by reflection. Later, Natasha's son, Gary, came to visit her. He appeared less withdrawn, his demeanor suggesting he wanted to talk. "I've been spending a lot of time with James lately," Gary explained. "I've been helping him with renovations at his house. It's a mess, he's dealing with termites, and the walls are starting to collapse." Natasha's expression softened with understanding. She remembered James borrowing her stethoscope not long ago to listen for termites in his walls, trying to locate their nests. Though relieved to hear her son's explanation, Natasha still felt a pang of worry. She hoped the changes she saw in Gary weren't just external, but marked a genuine turning point for him. However, what Gary didn't share was the truth of his and James' activities. Their supposed renovations had been a cover for something far more dangerous. Instead of fixing walls, they had been experimenting with making drugs. Through asking around and learning from others in the business, they had started to manufacture their own. Naturally, they tried the drugs themselves, but James hadn't realized just how much of a hold the substances had taken on Gary. Gary began selling the drugs on the streets to friends and associates, bringing in significant money. James felt comfortable with their arrangement, even as he turned a blind eye to Gary's increasing dependence. One particular batch, however, marked a dangerous turning point. Instead of selling it, Gary and his girlfriend consumed the drugs themselves, spiraling into a week-long bender. They partied incessantly, and Gary lost track of his actions, repeatedly taking hit after hit until he was out of his mind. The next time Gary visited James, the atmosphere was tense. James immediately inquired about the money from the drugs he had given Gary to sell. Gary hesitated before explaining that he didn't have all the money. James's expression darkened, fury rising in his voice. "How could you not have all the money? What did you do with it?" Gary's voice faltered as he admitted, I took the drugs myself." James's rage erupted. "Are you serious? Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice was a dangerous growl. "I have debts to pay off, and now you've left me short." Gary tried to stammer out an apology, but James was beyond reason. He grabbed Gary roughly, his voice cold and menacing. "You have 2 weeks to pay me back. If you don't, I'll make a call. There are people who will break your fucking legs if you don't settle this." Gary's heart raced as fear gripped him. He knew he was in the wrong, but the threat left him reeling. "You can't do this. We're friends," he stammered, but James's glare silenced him. "Friendship doesn't pay debts," James said coldly before striking Gary. The blows came hard and fast, leaving Gary bruised and trembling on the floor. James stood over him, his voice like ice. 2 weeks, Gary. Don't make me fix this another way." As Gary stumbled away, his mind raced with panic and regret. He had never seen James like this before, and now he understood just how far he had fallen into a world he couldn't control. Not knowing where else to turn, Gary visited his sister to confide in her. He had spoken to his girlfriend, but she was in no state to help him. His sister had always been his rock, someone he could rely on in moments of crisis. As they sat in her small, tidy kitchen, Gary poured out the entire story, his voice trembling with desperation. His sister listened intently, her face a mask of concern. When he finished, she let out a heavy sigh. "Gary, I can't help you financially," she said gently, "but we need to tell Mom. She has to know what's going on." Gary hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes. "I don't want her to worry, or to make things worse." "She'll find out eventually," his sister replied firmly. "It's better if she hears it from us." Together, they went to see Natasha and explained everything. As Gary recounted James's threats and the beating he had endured, Natasha's face turned pale. She was horrified. The idea that James, a man she considered family, someone who had been part of their lives for years, could threaten her son and resort to violence was almost too much to process. "James," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "How could he do this? He's like family. We've spent birthdays, Christmases together. He's watched you kids grow up, and now he's threatening to have your legs broken over money." She shook her head, disbelief and anger warring in her expression. Her eyes turned to Gary, her tone sharp. "And you? How could you be so stupid? How could you both be such idiots as to get involved in drugs? You know better." I raised you better." Gary lowered his head, shame washing over him. "I'm sorry, Mom. I never meant for it to get this bad." Her thoughts raced in loops. Her mind was reeling with shock, anger, and disbelief. She didn't want harm to come to her son, but the harsh truth was she simply didn't have the kind of money James was demanding. Her focus narrowed to one goal: getting Gary the help he needed and restoring some kind of stability to their lives. She clung to the vision of a future where her family was safe, clean, and whole again, though deep down she knew the road ahead would be long and brutal. She told her children to leave the matter with her. Gary and his sister exchanged uneasy glances and stressed that James mustn't find out they'd come to her. They didn't want to ruin her long-standing friendship with him. But Natasha was firm. "It's far beyond that," she said quietly, her voice strained with pain and finality. Later that night, she sat in silence, numb, trying to figure out what she was going to do. She had always been a regular at the same service station. Every couple of days she'd stop in for petrol. Over time, she noticed how quiet it was during late hours. Fewer customers. Fewer witnesses. She watched the attendants as they tallied the till at night, counting notes and coins. More than enough, she figured, to cover Gary's debt. She had never broken the law in her life. But now, desperate and cornered, she was seriously considering the unthinkable. After a week of watching and waiting, she convinced herself the robbery would be easy. Who would ever suspect her, a middle-aged woman? Still, the idea gnawed at her, and she searched frantically for alternatives. She couldn't take out a loan. Centrelink didn't make her a strong candidate. Selling her car would leave her stranded, and there was no one she trusted enough to ask for money, especially not with the shame of revealing what Gary and James had been up to. One day, while browsing an op shop for something entirely unrelated, her eyes landed on a balaclava. She hadn't gone in looking for one, but the moment she saw it, something clicked. It felt like a sign, absurd in hindsight, but at the time, it felt like fate handing her a solution. She picked her night, parked behind the service station, waited for the coast to clear. Heart pounding. When the store was empty, she pulled the balaclava on. It fit loosely, so she tied it at the back with a piece of wool. But the heist didn't unfold as planned. What she hadn't noticed during her surveillance was that nearby, across the parking lot, the police routinely parked at the KFC to check vehicle registrations. The moment she stepped inside, the station manager, alert and cautious, saw her come in. He didn't hesitate. Before Natasha could even speak, he pressed the panic button, locking the front doors and alerting the police. They arrived in seconds. Panicked, Natasha reached into her pocket for a pair of scissors. She thought if she could cut the balaclava off quickly, maybe she could explain. But the officers, not knowing what she was reaching for, mistook the gesture. They fired. The shot struck her squarely. She dropped where she stood. The officer who pulled the trigger froze in shock. He hadn't meant to kill anyone, especially not a woman. Especially not someone like her. As he rushed forward, he saw the scissors lying beside her hand. He used them to cut the balaclava free and recoiled when he saw her face. He turned away and vomited in the corner. An inquest was inevitable. They searched her belongings and found her phone. Her screensaver displayed a tarot card, Justice. Her son's number was among the contacts, and police traced his address. When Gary heard the news, he was stunned. He couldn't understand at first why his mother would do such a thing. But then the truth dawned on him. She'd done it for him. His sister broke down. The police informed her too. James was shattered when he heard. He tried to comfort them, to take responsibility, but the children refused to speak to him. Whatever sense of family they'd once shared had been obliterated. The police officer was ultimately acquitted. His actions ruled a tragic misunderstanding in the line of duty. But one detective remained unsettled. He kept returning to the tarot card they'd found on Natasha's phone. Justice. It wasn't the first time he'd seen it. In fact, every time this card had appeared, someone had died. There was no clear pattern. No evidence of foul play. Some deaths were accidents. Others, like Natasha's, were more complicated. But the detective couldn't shake the feeling that there was a thread tying them all together, something unseen, just out of reach. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt as though the cards weren't done with him yet. Remember to like, subscribe, and share to others, so you don't miss an episode.